Welcome to Stars Matter, a recruiting podcast from The Athletic, part of the Until Saturday feed. I'm your host, Mitch Light, joined by Ari Wasserman, our national college football recruiter. And Ari, actually, I believe, at home today, been traveling all around the Southeast, managed to squeeze a vacation in during this month. I miss you. Welcome, Ari. How are you doing, buddy?
That's what you got wrong, Mitch. I managed to squeeze work into my vacation month.
Okay.
you got it wrong. But listen, guys, it's been a long layover. We all know the score. It's been a while since Stars Matter was here. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be back with you guys. And I know the people who, became attached to Stars Matter are going to be relieved that we're back. And just seeing all your wonderful faces is really great. And I'm excited for a new season of covering this stuff with you guys. And, that'll be the nicest and most sentimental I'll be for a while, but just want you to, I value all three of you and so happy to be back.
Sounds good. Also got Manny Navarro here. Manny obviously covers Miami for us and recruiting. He's been very busy in South Florida covering his beat and I believe covering a much improved soccer team. His daughter's soccer team only lost 2-1 the other day. Is that true, Manny?
Yes. We're now 1-3. I think we've been outscored 13-3 in our last 3 games, but it's improvement. It was only 2-1 last game.
That's all you can hope for is improvement. You might need to make a change at defensive coordinator. And then we got Grace Rayner here. Grace covers recruiting for us, college football reporter. Grace has a fun story out today that we're going to talk about coaches and headsets. And she's been very busy prepping for the fall, covering both recruiting and some of the biggest games in the Southeast. Now from her new home base, the pride of Virginia, Grace Rayner. How's it going, Grace?
It's going good. It's good to be back with you guys. See your faces again.
Good. That's Ari.
I'm just excited to see that she's got a new place. That's all.
Yeah. Quick note, we've got.
I know, right? Do you see my lamp is crooked?
That's great. Yeah. That's about as much construction. You know those lamps that you get at IKEA that you have to like screw in together and feed the cord through?
Oh yeah.
That is the height of my manual labor ability. So mine would also be crooked too.
It's okay. My wife always just says, you're not good at things like that. So, that's what makes the world go. I got a neighbor who's good at things. Like if he needs sports info, I give him sports knowledge, tickets, maybe. He fixes things. So that's what makes the world go.
What my wife says to me, and I don't know if you guys get this. My wife says, you're not the best at a lot. She says it a lot though. Yeah. Like it's like, you're not the best at your calendar or you're not the best at this or that. And it's like, it adds up to like, what am I good at? Can you just
you know what we're not the best at right now? Diving into the podcast since we haven't done it for 2 months. So let's do that. But first, we've got a bunch of podcasts going this month. Ari has been literally and figuratively kind of all over the place recording podcasts. But just a reminder, next week, starting on August 28th, we'll really start with the calendar every week, a podcast every day in the Until Stars Matter, until Saturday feed, including Stars Matter. So guys, let's talk recruiting. Originally, I was going to start us off with kind of notable commitments because there's been a bunch, and then go over uncommitted 5 stars. But I am calling an audible. I want to dive in and get right to 2 programs that to me have caught my attention about what they're doing. The first one is Florida State. And Manny, I'm going to let you take this in a minute. But to me, this is almost a master class in building a rebuild. You hit the portal hard. No, very few teams want to hit the portal every year. It's just not. We can get into that. We have gotten into that. Hit the portal to go from mediocre to pretty good and then start recruiting your you-know-what off. And that's what this staff has been doing. We'll get into the numbers. But closing in on their first top 10 class since 2017. Just really impressed with Florida State.
Yeah, I think you really have to give Mike Norvell credit. And I went to the ACC kickoff event and talked to him for about 7 or 8 minutes in the hallway. And I initially wanted to talk to him about the transfer portal and just what a wizard he's been at that. But I couldn't really ignore what they've done on the trail, especially of late, getting KJ Bolden, who's a 5-star out of Buford, Georgia, a kid that said his Florida State was his dream school. Well, if Florida State wasn't sort of on the rise, I don't know if they still would have been his dream school and a program he commits to. You just look at everybody that they've gotten here. Charles Lester out of Venice, Florida. You think of where Florida State was a couple years ago, struggling with Norvell when he first took over. I don't think Charles Lester picks Florida State if they don't have this turnaround. So kudos to him, like you said, putting together the transfer classes, finding the success, and then ultimately being able to recruit at an elite level. And, I think they're favored to land Zaquan Patterson, who's another top 100 player out of Hollywood Chaminade, one of the top 5 safeties in the country. They could end up getting him in this class. So to me, I kind of, in my oddly specific predictions for the Athletic, I made this bold proclamation that the only thing Georgia's going to lose this coming season is the title of the #1 recruiting class. And I said that's because Florida State's going to come and get it. And I think Mike Norvell.
Ari's woken from a slumber there.
Ari's face.
You think they're going to win the recruiting crown?
I think they could. Yes, I think they could flip JoJo Trader, who's committed to Miami.
What's the route there? Yeah, give us the route.
Yeah, I think JoJo Trader's a big one. Obviously, Zaquan Patterson is another top 100. They've got some other kids that they're after that they've been sort of recruiting for a while. I got to look at all their targets, but I know those two come to mind right off the bat because they're South Florida guys. Look, Georgia right now, they're probably going to win the national title again. I mean, I'm picking up the three-peat this year. I think there's going to be a lot of these recruits who ultimately look at their playing time and like saying, do I really want to go sit the bench there? And Georgia's already had a couple guys flip, right? Didn't they have somebody flip to Alabama recently?
Brandon Thomas flipped to Florida State.
Right. Florida State took him from Georgia. So I think FSU's in a great position here to sneak up and catch the Bulldogs, especially if they can flip a couple of in-state Florida guys that are committed elsewhere right now.
I love it. Ari is.
You know what I love
intrigued.
more than anything, Manny? Let me tell you something about it. It's been 6 weeks since we've done a Stars Matter. You came out firing. That is a hell of that is. If you were right, if you turn out to be right about that, that would be one of the most impressive prognostications that I've seen in sports journalism. That's like an underdog thing, and it's not just Georgia. Ohio State already has 5 5-star prospects in their class. So they would have to get at least, I think, 3 or 4 more 5 stars to commit. And I just don't know.
If you were from a
math standpoint.
Yeah. If you were a betting man, Ari, what would you put the odds on Florida State getting the #1 class?
30-1.
30-1. Okay. I was going to say,
I just think from a math standpoint,
it's a big payday.
I mean, just from a math standpoint, I just don't know if, Florida State already has 21 commitments, so unless they sign 32 players this year, and hit 6 or 7 more top 100 players, I just don't think that the math is there. But maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. I mean, Manny, here's the thing I will say. When you were making your initial point about Florida State before we went off into La La Land, I think that the word that Mitch used was masterclass. And I think that this could be masterclass of rebuilding a program through the portal and then using the success that you have with portal guys to build a really good recruiting class in high school. Because, with Michigan State and some of the other schools that have done a really good job in the past of, flipping a roster in 1 year and having a much better season because of the portal, we haven't seen it translate to high school players. But because Florida State is in such a talent-rich state, because they probably have the most badass uniforms in college football, I just want to put that out there, and because they have such a history and tradition of winning, I think that's the perfect place to go from portal flip to back to recruiting at a high standard. And if they finish in the top 5, first top 10 class in 17, you said, Mitch, because of what Norvell has done, that's a master class of building a program, and I can get behind you on that. Manny, if they sign the #1 class in the country this year, I don't know. I'll do anything but eat the death chip again. I'm never doing that. But
I had 2 more names to throw at you. That's possibility.
2 more.
Jeremiah Smith and LJ McCray.
Ooh. Okay.
And that would be a 2-for-1 with Ohio State because you would knock one out of their class and flip it into your class.
Okay, tease. Correct. We're going to get to Ohio State in a minute. But Florida State mentioned they're number 6 in 2017, and they had 7 out of 8 years they had a top 10 class leading into that. But Grace, little tease here. On Monday, we have a Q&A coming with Cooper Patagna. I believe that's how you pronounce Cooper's last name. 247 Sports recruiting analyst. Really good stuff. He's only 31 years old and he's had like 10 jobs, great career. But you asked him who his favorite prospect in the 24 class was. And it's a Florida State kid who we haven't even mentioned yet. So Manny's written about him. So tell us about that conversation.
Yeah, our guy Luke Kromenhoek. He was really high on his athleticism and just the way that he's played the quarterback position so far. Obviously, he hasn't played it as long as some of these other guys, but I thought it was really fascinating because this was Cooper's job, right? Like when he worked at Washington and Oregon and Michigan, it was quite literally his job to evaluate kids and look at them in terms of what are they going to look like as college players. And so for him to pick Luke out of every single, not even just prospect in this class, or sorry, not even just quarterback in this class, but every prospect in the whole class of 2024, based on his potential alone, I thought was super fascinating.
I hope we're doing this podcast for years, and I can't wait so we can every Saturday, every week, we can compare Luke Kromenhoek versus Haas Haney. And so the guy that Manny discovered and the guy that Ari discovered. I know we don't really like discover these guys.
Didn't Manny also discover Trevor Jackson?
Yes, another one. But I remember Bill Landis, I said discovered Drew Aller. He wrote about him, like went to his high school in the pandemic. He was ranked in like the 600s and stuff. So I love following these guys.
I think it's Jackson Dart, but it hasn't, we'll see how that plays out.
Tell us. I think it was your editor maybe who discovered and said, why don't you write about this?
Yeah, you do a good job because my editor is a Vanderbilt fan, so he likes looking down at the depths of the rankings more than I do.
You're a snob. You just look at you don't even know how to click below top 100, right?
Yeah, 101, I'm out. But you do a really good job of finding those stories, and because I'm respectful of your ability to do so, I write them. But that's what happens. That's what ownership transfers.
Yeah. Speaking of a program that doesn't click below maybe 250 on the recruiting lists, Ohio State, Ari, you mentioned the 5 stars, a quarterback, a wide receiver, and the most important thing, defensive line. They get Edric Houston the other day, one of many good players on that Buford, Georgia team. Plus 2 other top 50 guys, both cornerbacks, Aaron Scott and Bryce Scott. Is it Bryce Scott? No, it's Bryce West. Bryce West. Too many Scotts there. Ari, I know this program you're familiar with. From a numbers standpoint, this might not be their best class, or it might be, but you got to love what they're doing on defense.
Yeah, but before we go really into Ohio State, Manny, I was very curious when you threw out Jeremiah Smith as a name. Mm-hmm. I know that he's been like, Jeremiah Smith is the king of grab ass recruiting, where he just goes out and like says things and goes places. And, through it all, it always seems that it comes back to the Buckeye Nut tweets and like Brian Hartline and stuff. Like, is there something that you're hearing or thinking that is new with that? Or is it just Florida State's looking good and that might convince him later on?
Yeah, I think from an in-state perspective, right? All these kids know each other. He's really good friends, obviously, with JoJo Trader. They're really close. So to me, I could see Florida State having a great year and these guys saying, let's go all play for Florida State at the end of the year. And just sort of, because as much as I think Jeremiah loves Ohio State, I've never gotten the sense that he's 1,000% committed to him. So I just think he's the kind of kid who could be one of those surprise flips on signing day.
Another tease, Manny and Grace are doing a recruiting prediction story coming next Tuesday while all of our other writers predict like how their teams are doing. You guys are going to predict what's going to happen in recruiting. I have a feeling we're going to hear some Florida State talk from Manny. So, Ari, let's get back to Ohio State.
Yeah, well, the one thing that I'll say about Ohio State's class is that they do have 5 5-star prospects in it and 2 receivers, but at least it's not 100%. And Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham, I think, are the next 2 to carry on the tradition that, they've had at the wide receiver position. But in order for them to, continue to assert themselves in a way that they expect to, which is competing for national championships every single year and being able to have games like the one that they had with Georgia in the playoff last year, you've got to beef up the defensive line. You got to beef up the defense, and you got to just, get stops. It's like, I know they were probably a field goal away from winning a national championship a year ago, and it's like, you can't get blown off the ball and get your ass kicked by Michigan and have a soft defense in certain games. So, for Larry Johnson, a coach that a lot of people in Columbus, at least fan-wise, are saying, hey, this guy might be over the hill and time to move on. For him to bounce back here and get Justin Scott out of Chicago and Edric Houston out of Buford, a very important school considering Raiola, a former Ohio State commit, goes and plays quarterback there. Actually, we need a beat writer for that school. There's a lot.
I was looking at Grace. I said, Grace, you need to get down, or at least we need a camera there. Take some photos.
You moved in the wrong direction, Grace.
Right? Yeah, I know.
You should have moved south. But I think that what Ohio State's doing too, like Aaron Noland, they get the quarterback, they've got the receivers, like they've got a lot of really important pieces on this team, and like. This is the type of class that you would hope that they would get a year after maybe not signing the type of class that they were, top 5 class in 2023. You can't really say anything negatively, but this one seems to be more well-rounded and have a lower basement, higher basement.
Higher floor.
Higher floor. Yeah.
I was going to say out of podcast shape, but you've been doing them every day. You maybe
I know. I literally I haven't written a story in 6 weeks, but
yeah,
I have been podcasting. I just think maybe it's just I am who I am. Maybe
that's it. Yeah, that is. You are what you are. All right, let's take a look. We're going to go back and hit on some more teams in a few minutes that have caught my attention. You guys might have some of your own. By the way, Ari, Florida State uniforms are fine, but this might be an old man take, but give me UCLA's. UCLA's powder blues are my favorite college uniform.
I think the most beautiful game of the year is the UCLA USC home jersey versus home jersey rivalry game, and I think UCLA is definitely in the top 10.
Okay, good. All right, we mentioned Edric Houston, defensive lineman from Buford, committing to Ohio State. Jordan Ross, edge rusher from Vestavia Hills, Alabama, basically Birmingham, committing to Tennessee. He's a 5-star in 247, number 37 in the composite. This one, Manny, was interesting. We were kind of following it. Kamarian Franklin, defensive lineman from Lake Cormorant, Mississippi. Looked like Auburn. I think Florida State was in there, but here's it goes to Ole Miss or commits to Ole Miss. Second straight year that Ole Miss lands the top player in the state. Last year was 5-star linebacker Centurine Perkins. Before that, 2018 was the last time the top player in the state signed with an in-state school. That was wide receiver Malik Heath to Mississippi State. The last time Ole Miss landed the top player was 2015, Javon Patterson. That's a long time for any of you guys. I mean, Ole Miss has had some success, no doubt, but that's 8 years between landing the top player in your own state to be a state school in the SEC. That's a little too long to be if you want to compete at a high level.
Yeah, I think Lane Kiffin, I think he's really turned to the transfer portal a ton here the last couple of years, and I don't want to say they've kind of gone backwards in recruiting because obviously this was a big win for them. But if you look at the average player rating, right, for Ole Miss from last year compared to this year with this class, it's down over a point from what it was a year ago. And to me, I think part of that is maybe that they're just not pushing as hard for some of the high school recruits anymore as they are necessarily transfers and sort of prioritizing that. So important win for them, though. Auburn, it looked like Kamarian was headed to Auburn. I know Miami invested a ton of energy and
invested being the key word there.
Yes, and probably other things to try to get him to come to Coral Gables. He was here 5 times for unofficial visits, I believe, or with including his official visit. So they tried really hard to convince him to come here, and ultimately he stays in state and goes to Ole Miss. And they needed a defensive lineman. Their defensive line class isn't necessarily that spectacular. So, but another big important in-state victory for some of these schools, especially with defensive linemen. I've been paying attention to the defensive linemen because Miami's been after a bunch of them, and it seems like a lot of the elite guys have been staying home.
That's the next guy, Williams Winery. Edge rusher from Lee's Summit North, number 3 player in the state to Missouri. For as mediocre as Missouri's been, they're not afraid to land some 5 stars. They obviously with Luther Bolden and Grayson, you talked to his coach last week, and I guess we probably. I'm never shocked when even a top 5, top 10 kid stays in state. just for obvious reasons. So this one wasn't a shock. And you talked to his coach, and NIL definitely factor, but he also had some interesting things to say about NIL options everywhere.
Yeah, that was the part that I think you see a guy like that commit to Mizzou, and everyone in the comments is like, "Oh my gosh, NIL." And Missouri's state law is very friendly for NIL. But he can make money basically now, right, Mitch? If he signs his
so it's the deal.
agreement.
If you sign with an in-state school, you can profit off your name, image, and likeness before you enroll. But the key is he needs to sign a what's I guess called a financial aid agreement, which he can do like when the academic year starts. So I assume he's already signed a financial agreement with Missouri, so he can start profiting now, as long as it's with an in-state school. So it's like Grace used the term, very NIL friendly for the in-state programs. I guess you could go to Missouri State too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that was definitely part of it. And when we were talking to his high school coach, he was like, "It should be part of it." Like this is, I think we're maybe moving away from the stigma of NIL playing a role in these decisions. Like, if you have this opportunity, why not? But I thought that it was really he said this in our story, Mitch, like he had options everywhere. He was going to have NIL opportunities everywhere he went. Like if we think Oklahoma and Oregon and Georgia, 3 places that he visited multiple times, weren't also going to have competitive packages for him, I think that's a little bit naive. So he was going to be set regardless of where he went. And I'm curious to see if this has a domino effect. I don't know where Ryan Wingo is in his recruitment, but I do think that if you're Mizzou, you're pushing this pretty hard.
Yeah, it's been a sneaky good state of late. Missouri has not done great, but obviously a big win there. We've mentioned KJ Bolden, safety from another Buford guy, number 7 overall in the composite to Florida State. And then Colin Simmons was a big one, edge rusher from Duncanville, Texas, staying in state to Texas. So that is 6 high-profile guys, mostly 5-star, all top 40-ish guys. And KJ Bolden to Florida State is the only one who signed with a non-SEC school, if you're counting Texas to the SEC. So the rich committed to. Excuse me, thank you, Ari. So the rich are getting richer. So I want you guys want to hit on some just bullet points, schools. We don't need to spend a lot of time on them. The first one,
it's called Around the World.
Around the country, yeah.
Around the world.
Yeah, okay. Grace is
They're playing a game in Ireland.
Okay.
I'm going to keep interrupting you every time you keep trying to talk.
Okay.
Yep.
Podcasting. This is Grace's in-state school now. Virginia Tech, number 36. Only 4 of the 17 guys are blue chippers, but here's the key: 3 of them are top 10 players in the state of Virginia. Last year, Virginia Tech got none of the top 15 in the state. Their average player rating of 87.91 is up quite a bit. It's a 1.5 from last year. And Grace, as we read more about it, and you talk to coaches in Virginia, it's quite clear that this new staff with Brent Pry is doing some damage control. It was no secret that the previous staff in Fuente was a Texas native, and that staff went into Texas a lot and not great success, and it pissed off the local coaches. And this is a great – I mean, I've got no ties to Virginia Tech, but there's no reason that Virginia Tech should not do better in state and let Penn State and all these other schools come in. So good to see them kind of protecting their backyard a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Penn State was absolutely waxing them. And I think that they've really made a commitment to, maybe I'm a little bit recency biased because I live here now, but in the 757 area, the Norfolk, Virginia Beach area, it is so talent rich. And I've talked to a couple of high school coaches who said, yeah, Fuente went to Texas a lot, maybe came through once, which I was legitimately stunned by. Like,
Ari, what do you think of that? Good move, in-state coach? Just...
I personally think that if you live in a talent-rich area, you should fly across the country instead of.
Okay, I thought so. I thought you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of they can field a whole team with just kids in this area. That's what Frank Beamer did. Like, you could just load up on 757 talent and go beat anyone in the ACC except for maybe Clemson and Florida State.
Yeah, when I was working at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, Ohio State, it's actually the year that they played Virginia Tech. The year they won the national championship and lost to Virginia Tech at the beginning of the year. Going into that week, it was funny because they ended up losing the game. But like I wrote a story called "What Happened to Virginia Tech," and now we're going on almost 10 years of it, of like what happened to the Tidewater area That's where Michael Vick is from. That's like where a lot of their best players are from. And it just seemed like they've just like lost footing. And the thing that's scary about Virginia Tech is that like all of us at our age remember in the early 2000s and the late 90s and stuff when they were competing for national championships. I have distinct childhood memories of Virginia Tech being a game away from playing in the BCS national championship game. Like the brand Virginia Tech, those helmets, those colors, Enter Sandman, everything like means something to us. But the thing that I'm afraid of is that kids these days have no connection whatsoever to that. That brand is like, it's just old news, and they haven't done anything from a pulse standpoint to get it back. And I feel like the only possible way they can get it back is to own that area again, or to find a coach who can activate that area and, you know, make it theirs. And unfortunately, it's just going to be harder because Penn State's over there, and, you know, all the East Coast schools and the, you know, ACC, like that's like a very competitive place to recruit.
It's no secret. It's like it's almost. And
like the question is like, if Michael Vick came up out of the Tidewater area right now, would he go to Virginia Tech?
Right now, no.
So like that, how do you fix that problem? And that to me is like, you just got to go all in on where you live, Grace, and hope that it works out, because this national shit's not going to work for them. They're not going to be finding their salvation in Texas. You know, it's like it's home is where the heart is, man. Go after it.
One of the best recruits in school history was Kevin Jones, running back from Pennsylvania. But you're right, most of their guys are local.
Did you look that up?
Did I look that up?
Did you go look at Virginia Tech's all-time classes? And
Kevin Jones was like the number 2 recruit in the country. He's their top recruit.
I venture to say that all of them, I bet you that he might be the only exception of like their all-time class.
Yeah, he might be. Yeah, we can look it up.
Yeah. Marcus Vick, Tyrod Taylor, I believe, is from there. Hampton, Virginia. Like they're all from there.
Well, I will add this: the top three recruits in the state of Virginia it looks like they're going to be committing to SEC school. So they still haven't cracked it, but they're certainly at least in the
just better. All you do is make incremental improvements.
Yeah. You count the DC, Maryland, the DMV area as part of that thing too, right?
No, I mean the Tidewater is a specific region.
No, I know, but do you also count Virginia Tech's territory as the DMV as well?
I think you have to.
You know, so they have multiple like areas, and I feel like the Tidewater area and the DMV area are 2 separate territories that they both could do pretty good in if they tried really hard to. So it's just reminding people that Virginia Tech is a brand and winning something. I think it's just, I'd hate to see that brand die.
And Blacksburg is not very far from, it's 2.5 hours from Winston-Salem, so it's 3.5 hours from Charlotte. It's not far from a lot of metropolitan areas. All right, here's a school where my note is just like, they're back in the game. Do you know what I'm talking about, Ari? Who would you say?
Vanderbilt.
No.
Oh.
What's with the shots today? I mean, we're back in the game.
In the game.
Auburn. They're just, we're hearing them again. 14 of their 16 commits are blue chippers. Last year, 10 of 22 were blue chippers. 14 of 16 so far. Manny, you know, we were monitoring. Seems like we've been monitoring a lot of these doing these stories on commitments, and we're hearing Auburn again, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I did the biggest improvement from the 23 class to 24, and Auburn is by far further ahead than anybody else in terms of average player rating. I think 2.33 better per recruit with, like you said, the 14 blue chip guys. So obviously a tremendous job there by Hugh Freeze, and you figured this was going to happen, right? Like, especially after the depths that Auburn fell to. Like, you have plenty of room to improve when you're a program like Auburn there in the SEC and can recruit great players. So, but you're right. I mean, they've done a fabulous job. It seems like they're in it for a lot of kids, as you mentioned. I think ultimately here, you know, this is the kind of class that, again, it's 16 commits. This is the kind of class that can jump into the top 5 if they really push the throttle and flip some guys down the stretch.
All right, Wisconsin, number 20.
You know, hey, before you go real quick, Mitch, I just wanted to say that there were people that would comment on, like, in my stories and tweet at me that they like Stars Matter, but they can't listen to it anymore because they're Auburn fans. And it just reminds them of how they're not just only not winning battles, but they're not even mentioned. Like as remember we used to do This Week in Recruiting. I don't know if that's ever going to start back up again.
That's back when you wrote stuff.
Yeah, back when I was a writer. I remember like Auburn just wasn't a topic. They just weren't involved with anybody. So it's like even if they don't have this huge renaissance of rankings and commitments this year, an average player rating, it's like at least they're freaking trying. Like they weren't even trying last year. So that to me, it's like the second Hugh Freeze got hired. Anybody who follows this stuff knew that was gonna happen, and it's kind of cool to see it actually, taking place. So sorry about that. Yeah.
Don't apologize. Ari, never apologize for making a good point.
Yeah. Okay.
Wisconsin, number 23 in the rankings, only 21 commits, so it's not a class that's just propped up by having like 27 commits. Closing in on second ever top 25 class. The last one was in 2021. Luke Fickell, just sort of like a workman-like blue collar. They've gone into Pennsylvania, I think 4 commits. They've got a lot of ties to New Jersey there. So just Wisconsin. Not that they really win anywhere, but back in the game. UCF, great. Manny, you mentioned UCF. Our greats, you might have thrown out UCF when I was talking about Auburn. This might be, we've talked programs are taking advantage of their new lot in life. UCF is definitely doing so. Number 26, only 17 commitments. 9 of the 17 are blue chippers. I'm going to group them with Houston, another new Big 12 school. Only 8 commits, only 1 blue chipper, number 78. So there's 2 programs in talent-rich areas, new to the Power 5 or Power 4, whatever we're going to call it. And hats off to UCF, just doing a really good job. In a state, obviously, Manny, where Florida State's doing great things, there's room for more than
Gators
1 or 2 schools. Yeah, and the Gators too. So there's room for everyone in that state.
Yeah, I mean, I've written about it plenty. The state of Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, everybody's been coming in here for years. Clemson, while all these programs have been down and taking the best players. And, we've seen it, Joey Bosa and the Bosa brothers at Ohio State, all the great receivers at Alabama and Georgia. You got to start, if you're ever going to turn things around here in the state of Florida, you got to start winning those battles and keeping the elite kids here. And you see it, it's a much more balanced battle this year. And UCF, now that they're in a Power 5, I mean, I remember getting asked this question in one of my mailbags. Do you think UCF can be like a top 30 program? And I didn't think they'd be able to do it this quickly, but clearly Gus Malzahn, like he's gone in there and he's convinced a bunch of kids that, hey, we're in a Power 5 now. We're going to the Big 12 and you can come here and it's going to be different. And they are. I mean, they've got one of the best classes in the country, 25th, I think, overall in terms of average player rating. So it's legit.
UCLA, Ari, speaking of programs and trying, I mean, I think they're going to have a good team this year. So, who are we to knock their strategy? But to me, that's still a program with so much untapped potential. I know there's hurdles there. It's not maybe the amazing job that a lot of people think, but only 12 commits so far, 3 blue chippers, the number 50 class. They rely on the portal a lot, but I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like crazy because it's kind of been the way that it's gone. And listen, just got Dante Moore.
Yeah,
so it's like sometimes they just like pop up out of nowhere and surprise you a little bit. But
that's one of the most surprising commitments flips in 3 years. Yeah,
I know. And I don't think they've named a starting quarterback there yet. So I'm kind of on alert to see if that has any instant impact on what they're doing this year. But yeah, it's like I feel like UCLA is the hardest team to analyze in college football. Like the way that Chip Kelly has done it, like you're like, oh, they're gonna have a good team this year. It's like it's really hard to do when you haven't recruited at all, like the last few years. It's like how he's doing it. It's like he's got his own way, and the Pac-12 might allow him to create a team that might thrive in that style of football that wouldn't thrive in others. But I don't really understand it. I really don't. He doesn't love recruiting. It's been clearly illustrated in just the results, but also too, like I know a few people on his recruiting staff who are really on the ball, so it's like a weird juxtaposition between like pretty solid teams, a team that has shown ability in the past to sign top 10 classes, but also not really doing that at all the last, well, frankly, for the entire Chip Kelly era. I don't really know how to do the math on that here.
So Grace, let me ask you, we do this every so often in this podcast because we are of different ages and different frame of reference, as Ari likes to point out. When I note a team that actually won something before the year 2000, Ari doesn't acknowledge the existence of college football before that.
I don't like that you think that Georgia Tech can be good because they won a championship when you were 11.
I was older than 11. I was in college. Grace, what is your
old man?
I know. Although Grace told me today I wasn't old, so thank you, Grace.
You're welcome.
What's your opinion of UCLA football?
Like completely non-existent. I mean, like no opinion. I don't think I ever a single time, and a lot of that's geography, like growing up on the other side of the country. But my entire UCLA knowledge was John Wooden, UCLA basketball, and how many national championships they had, and where it's stacked up against, all the other schools in the ACC coming after them. But I have absolutely zero UCLA football knowledge or memories.
Yeah, because
go ahead. You know
man.
what I think of when I think of UCLA football? I think of Edgerrin James running for like 300 plus yards and knocking him out of the championship game back in '99.
Yep.
Like, that's the one memory I have of UCLA football. That's like even remotely in the last 25 years.
Yeah, and
UCLA football used to be like a top 10 team in the early 2000s.
Terry Donahue. Well, like back when I was a kid, they were good, and maybe we'll have a more UCLA focused podcast. We'll talk recruiting. There's a lot of things that are working against it. Commitment, financial commitment, all that stuff. I know back in the 10, 15 years ago, like their salary pool was not good. It was hard to get quality assistants because the cost of living is so high there. So it's not just a slam dunk that they're going to be awesome. So here's one that kind of surprises me. Louisville, only 14 commits, only 3 blue chippers. I'm a big Jeff Brom fan. He did they weren't recruiting, Ari, you covered the Big Ten. They recruited fine. They were good at finding some gems, especially at the wide receiver position. I think we talked about on our last podcast, but he's just a really good coach. So I don't know if he needs elite recruiting, but I thought he would come out swinging a little bit more. Ari? Is Ari there?
I'm sorry, my internet's bad. Were you talking to me?
I was talking to you. I was kind of like a good host does. I was like referring to previous conversation.
It lagged for a second. What were you saying?
Do you guys have internet in Texas?
Actually, I have to get the AT&T guy over to my house because upstairs the internet goes in and out like every 30 minutes, and it drives me absolutely.
It's good for someone who's on a podcast.
And I have this like little thing here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That is supposed to be a booster of internet, but apparently I'm too far away from the thing. So, back in the day, I used to have to like stop the cam and then start it back up again. To like, remember those days? Now I don't stop the cam because he's going YouTube, and like sometimes I lose you. So you said you thought somebody would come out firing, and they haven't. Who was it?
I don't know. Who do you think?
Lincoln Riley?
No, maybe if you spent more on your internet and less on your perfect frames behind you, you could better internet.
My wife did those.
I was talking to Louisville. And I preface it by saying I don't think his classes at Purdue were great. He found some great high-end talent, especially at the wide receiver position, and maybe he's not a guy that needs to have elite classes. But I thought just rejuvenated at his alma mater, they'd be off a little faster.
Yeah, well, I actually talked to him on the phone as you knew it.
Yes,
you said this should be a good story, and then I interviewed him, and I don't know if it was just a bad day or what, but like. I didn't leave with a story, which is very rare when you interview somebody who's the head coach of a program. And I think the problem is, I don't know what the identifiable plan for Louisville is these days, and like his past there was like just from a different era, and it's like, I guess the idea is go down to Florida and find the next Lamar Jackson and hope it works out like that again. Because I think that Louisville traditionally has done a really good job with 3-star prospects in Florida that just get under-recruited by the big three down there. And that's a good point. But, like, now that Kentucky has just done a great job in Kentucky and Ohio, and, Louisville has been kind of a non-factor in their own state for the past few years and, like, trying to pick up the sloppy seconds of Florida. It's just like, is that the plan, or is the alma – like, they have – a lot of people who were around those really good Louisville teams 10 and 15 years ago. And like now it's just like, I don't know what the plan is. And maybe I should have written a column about that of just like, what is Louisville's straight line strategy? What should it be? if you were the head coach of Louisville, like what would you pick your strategy to be? Because I don't know, mine would be try my luck in Florida, even though that's traditionally how they've done it. It's just a different time now. Like, what do you guys think? Like, if you were the head coach there, what would your strategy be?
Well, I mean, I think, unfortunately, I mean, they've got the competition of the SEC right next door and right around them. So it's almost like, you have to venture into Florida where maybe there's more talent. I know last year they went into California and pulled a few kids out of California.
Not really a sustainable model.
Not a sustainable model. So maybe it's the transfer portal. I mean, that's how he kind of did it. They signed 25 transfers this last cycle, which was the most in the ACC. And so maybe that's what he's doing. Maybe he's trying to follow the Mike Norvell model to success, right? Get Louisville to be really good, and then start recruiting high school in a couple of years.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk another ACC school that was not on here. I'm going to put Grace on the spot. When I first started working with Ari in recruiting, it's the anti-Auburn. It was a program we talked about all the time. Ari wrote stories about him. Cool kids table. Grace, your alma mater is no longer sitting with the cool kids. They're over there with, the not cool kids. What's going on?
They're not winning enough. I mean, I think when you are producing talent like Sam Howell and Drake May, and then you go and lose to Georgia Tech last year, it's not comprehensible. It just makes no sense. And then you've got a lot of these kids that geographically can still play in the SEC. You've got NC State that Dave Doran has kind of got his brand and his blue collar sort of gritty way of playing. But I really do think it comes down to wins. Like if you're a kid in North Carolina and you have any interest in UNC and they can win 8 or 9 games, I think that should be enough. But I don't know. You have to make the layups, which they could not do last year. Speaking
of layups, a couple weeks ago, Grace came to town for the recruiting symposium.
Oh my gosh, stop.
Staffer symposium. She brought her dad in town. Dad's a big fan of Nashville. He loves music. Went to a jazz club. Went out to dinner with Dr. Rayner. I got the full scouting report. Grace has undersold her high school athletic career, specifically basketball.
I had a feeling. I suspected this.
Stop.
You were really good at basketball?
Every dad's job to gas up their kid. It
was, yeah. I mean, 4-year starter. Most
at a boarding school.
It doesn't matter what school,
IMG is a boarding school.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
No, this was nowhere remote. This is not even the same universe as IMG.
Runs the floor, multi-sport athlete. I mean, it was just, it was very impressive. So maybe we'll go to the guest line. We need to the hotline. We need to sell.
What kind of doctor is Dr. Rayner?
He's retired, right? Yes.
He is, yeah. He was an eye doctor.
So he was an eye
ophthalmologist.
Doctor. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So obviously he knows what he's seeing when he sees a good basketball player.
I'm just really hoping he was really hoping he was a podiatrist, but there's so many things in this world that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. That would have been too I
good.
would have died.
Yeah.
If you would have said podiatrist. I would have passed away. So I'm happy it didn't.
But yes, Ari, we missed you in Nashville. Manny, next year we missed you in Nashville. Had a good time.
What they say in the Jewish faith next year in Israel.
Okay. All right. So on that note, a few more things I want to hit on. Grace did some really good reporting after the collapse of the Pac-12 and talked to some kids who were committed to basically the 4 schools left behind as we're recording this on Thursday early afternoon.
He came up with that story idea, by the way.
Say that again?
Didn't Hunt tell you to do it?
He did.
Yeah. Yes. I'm jealous. It wasn't my idea. So something could be happening later today with 2 of those teams no longer left out in the cold. But talk a little bit about what some of the kids were, the immediate. I mean, literally that day, Friday and Saturday and Sunday, that weekend, you were talking to kids who were committed to those 4 schools. It must have been what the heck's going on?
Yeah, I think that they were totally in the dark and to a certain extent still are. I mean, A lot of them said that the coaching staff, called and sort of tried to, smooth it over and reassure them that it would be okay. But they don't know. I mean, the Cal kid was optimistic that maybe they could move with Stanford and sort of go as a package deal, and maybe that will happen now in the ACC. I don't know. We'll figure that out probably sooner rather than later. But there were a couple of them that had some Power 5 offers at Oregon State that were like, part of our decision was to play P5. And so if they don't land in a Power 5 conference, that's something I'll have to reevaluate. And then there were a couple of others that were like, well, I love Washington State. I love Cal. Like, I'm fine with wherever they end up. But I don't know. I just feel bad for them, like there's just absolutely no clarity whatsoever. And I feel like recruits have so much on their plate right now to begin with that I don't know. I feel bad for them.
At least the timing's not awful. It's the summer. They don't have to sign for
That's
4
true.
months. So they can sort through some things. I made a list of the top. I'm going to go through it real quick. The top, and then got a question for you guys. The 247 composite, the team rankings right now: Georgia 1, Ohio State 2, Florida 3, Alabama 4, Florida State 5, Tennessee 6, Texas A&M 7, Michigan 8, LSU 9, Penn State 10. For average player rating, it's Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Auburn at 5, Florida State, Texas A&M, USC, Tennessee, Clemson. So I fired through those really quick. There's some notable teams that are not in the top 10 of either list, so overall or average player rating. And I'm going to ask each one of you guys, which one should we be worried about, and which one do you feel like, hey, don't worry? And they could have done some more research. Obviously, there's class size and all that matters. But got Notre Dame, Oregon, Miami, Oklahoma, and Texas are not in the top 10 of overall ranking or average player rating. I'll start with you, Ari. Which one do you feel the best about, and which one would you be kind of worried about?
Will you say the list one more time, just so I have the whole list again? It's hard for me to remember 5 things at once. I don't have a big enough brain. Did I lose you again?
Yes. That's a good way to stall. Just unplug your internet.
Said, can you? I just asked you, can you run me through the 5 or 6 that you did again? I heard Oklahoma and
jot them down.
And Texas.
Jot them down, or it's also on the rundown. But Notre Dame, Oregon, Miami, Oklahoma, and Texas.
I don't feel particularly great about any of them, to be honest. I am a little bit worried about Texas this year, because a lot of the Texas players are committed elsewhere. It's like you could talk about slow starts, but if you go look at the 247 Sport Composite, and you look at the state of Texas, a lot of those players have already committed elsewhere. So I don't know, they're going to have to go national to make this up. It's not like, 8 of the top 10 players in Texas are off the board. It's like they're all committed. So I don't know. As you get into September, I don't think that it's a slow start anymore for any of these teams. Like, am I wrong about that? Like, it's like, okay, June, April, May, slow start. Who cares? But shit, dude, the season's starting this weekend.
No, I think that's fair. 10 of their 16 are blue chippers with 1 5-star. So, all right, Grace, what do you think? What schools on that, if you got the list, what would you feel good about, concerned about?
I would say concerned about Miami. Florida is just, we've touched on it. It's such a talent-rich state, and they're competing with so many people, let alone Florida State doing what they're doing, and then you throw in a couple losses, and I would say Miami probably gives me the most pause. This might be a hot take, but I actually feel pretty good about Oklahoma. I think Brent Venables is a really good recruiter. They just signed a top 5 class last year. I think a lot of people are going to want to come play with my guy, Jackson Arnold, who, I love his game. And so, I think a lot of it will be sort of wait and see with OU, but I don't feel as bad about them as maybe some other people.
Manny?
Well, first of all, I'm surprised Ari said Texas, since he's got Texas going to the national championship game, right? So that should automatically give him
those are 2 separate things, though. Maybe Texas should be the one that we feel the best about because, Miami has 21 commits and Oklahoma has 20. It's like, how much are you going to be able to improve your team when 75% of your class is already put together? At least Texas has 9-10 more guys to go,
exactly,
that they could try to fill it back up again. But like, we're not talking about 8 to 11 member classes here. We're talking about classes that have 20 or more in them, and it's like, there's 10 spots, and I feel like 20 teams should be top 10. So there's always going to be 10 losers out there. But like, if Texas finished like with the 13th best class this year, I'd be like, what the hell happened?
Well, I was going to say my answer is I agree with Grace. It's Miami, because I think a lot of the elite guys that they hosted in June, especially on the defensive line, which is the priority for Mario Cristobal, have picked other schools. And obviously we'll find out about David Stone on Saturday. He's got them among their 3 finalists. But Miami's average player rating has dropped 2.5 points since last year when they had the number 7 class.
All those 3 stars that Ari was so excited about a few months ago.
Yes, and
they wanted to spread them out to have more excitement by them, right? Was that what he was doing?
That's what he was doing. Listen, man.
I would just text Ari randomly on a Tuesday night.
If I were the head coach of Miami and I was getting 5 commitments from 3 stars, I'd want them to do it all on the same day.
Like on a Friday.
Midnight, right? It would be a Friday night news dump. I would do the exact opposite. But yeah, anyway.
I worry for them, because I don't think they're going to have a particularly great season. I think they're 7 or 8 win team. And I don't know that gets guys juiced up to want to commit to this program. So I think Miami could be the one that ultimately has the biggest drop. And they've had the biggest drop. When you compare the 23 cycle to 24, they're by far the biggest drop. Alabama's next, believe it or not. And that's just because they had such a ridiculous class. They're down 2 points. Texas is down 2 points. Then Louisville and Michigan State. That's the top 5 in terms of the biggest drop. So I think right now Miami has to be worried.
You want to hear more drops too?
Let's hear it.
We're speaking of drops. Life Wallet stock is down 93.90% since April.
I'm not an investor like you are. Is that good or bad? Is that good or bad? You told me to invest.
I don't know if there's a correlation between their NIL fund and this stock, but we're trading at 7 cents
wrote
right
about
now.
that it's not.
I know. I just wanted to make a joke.
Yeah.
Yes. No,
but you can explain it to people who don't understand that, Manny. I think it'd be a good addition to the show.
Yeah, I think I checked in with some sources at Miami when all this news on John Ruiz came out that he was being investigated by the feds, and as his stock was free falling, that 80% of Miami's NIL deals are now through outside sources not related to John Ruiz. A year ago, Miami probably doesn't sign the 7th class in the country if John Ruiz is going through this. So I think as long as that money is still coming in from other sources, which I believe it is, and they keep advertising for Canes Connection, then Miami should have some money to compete. Now, are they going to be able to buy all the best players in the country? Probably not.
So on this list, no one's mentioned Oregon, but they are 15 of their 21 or 22. I've got 2 different numbers here, are blue chippers. So there's a lot of good quantity there. And I'm sure, no doubt, getting a boost of late or not, getting the Big Ten invite help alleviate some probably concerns there. So we spent a lot of time talking ACC teams here. We talked Virginia Tech, we've talked Louisville, we've talked North Carolina, we talked Miami.
Hit the big one now.
No, in some of the best journalism that I've seen in Friday's ACC mailbag, an inquisitive reader asked Manny who would win a battle royale of all 14 ACC football coaches. And Manny's is very researched. Who do you think he picked, Ari? Of all 14 ACC, if they just put them in a ring, who would win?
Royal Rumble.
The Royal Rumble, whatever.
Whoever gets thrown
out.
Weapons?
No weapons. Right.
I'm going to guess he didn't pick that.
No weapons.
I mean,
it was very well thought out. Very well made sense.
I mean, so I know it's probably not going to be Mario Cristobal if it was well thought out.
No, his answer was well thought out. And I don't want to spoil wild.
No, I'm saying like you would have thought it was just a layup if you picked Mario Cristobal. Yeah. That's the one that jumps out to me. But am I forgetting somebody?
Well, Mario, I don't want to spoil his. Mario didn't attend this fictitious battle because he was doing something else. But yeah, there's probably someone off the top of your head you're not thinking of him. He is he's a new coach. He was a former offensive lineman. Just kind of Manny's sort of like a silent assassin, right?
Yes, he really is. I think Brent Key.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
is the kind of guy you don't want to run into. After midnight as you're coming home.
I'm looking up Brent Key's height and weight.
He's a big dude.
45 years old.
You haven't beaten Narduzzi, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
See, here's the problem. I think Narduzzi would win because he is angry all the time.
He's scrappy.
And also,
I'm going Narduzzi every day.
Like, all Brent Key would have to say to Narduzzi is, I'm buying one of your players in the transfer portal when he is dead. And also, let's be honest, Brent Key, he was a guard. So, like, come on. Like, yeah, no, it is well thought out. But, like, in terms of, like, I feel like size has nothing to do with if you can win a fight, and everything to do with, like, how angry you are. And, like, I would not want to fight with that Narduzzi. I think half the stuff that comes out of his mouth,
right?
I think half the stuff that comes out of his mouth is just like crazy. But I just I wouldn't push him if I were in public with him.
Yeah, that's a good call.
But the thing that I wanted to say, and they didn't make the list, is like, are we worried at all about Clemson, or are we just going to accept the fact that this is who they are?
Yeah, well, here's what I like, and I would definitely want Grace to chime in. I like the fact that they're stocking up on some wide receivers, because that's kind of like the problem. I mean, it's the problem this year's team, probably lack of playmakers. For all the quarterback success and the defensive line success too, they were great at wide receiver, and they kind of got away from that. Antonio Williams was good, a true freshman last year. They got Sammy Brown, the top 5 kid, I think, from the Atlanta area. So it's not elite, but it seems like they're sort of back in the game a little bit. Is that fair, Grace? Or are you still a little critical?
I think the wide receiver point is a really good one. I mean, Jeff Scott used to absolutely dominate the Florida area, just getting 5-star after 5-star.
Should have tried that at South Florida, but
I know. And they had quarterback issues, obviously, but the receivers just really fell off these past couple of years. And then this year they went out and got Bryant Wesco out of Texas, which is a state they've been making a lot of progress in, and TJ Moore out of Tampa. And then you throw in their ties to the Georgia area. I think Clemson just knows who they are and knows exactly what kind of player it's looking for. I don't know that they're going to sign a, top 5 class, but it's rare that they do, I think they've done it twice. So I'm not concerned, but I don't know that I have them finishing in the top 10. I think top 15 is probably a little more realistic.
Ari, is that sufficient for you? You seem
I've been talking about the fall of Clemson's football program for 4 years now, and it's finally happening. I don't know. It's like, it takes time to listen, they might make the playoff this year.
I love the contradiction. I've been talking about the fall of their program. It's happening now. They might make the playoff.
They might make the playoff this year, but I think over the course of the next 10 years, they are going to be half as good as they were for the previous 10. I think that they will not be able to sustain what they did for the first 10. And in order for them to maintain them, and when I say sustain what they did, I'm talking about top 2-3 program. I'm not saying they're going to stink,
right?
I'm not going to say that they stink as a program. I'm just going to say that they're not an annual national championship contender anymore. And it's like, listen, we joke about, my take on Clemson, but has anybody talked about them at all in the playoff race this year so far? I feel like they're the most under-discussed team in all of the preseason, even on our podcast. Have we spent much time talking about Clemson?
I picked them to win the ACC.
I did too.
I know a lot of people think that Florida State's going to do it, and I'd like to see if that's actually just overhype or if they're going to be that good. But Clemson is not a team that can stand shoulder to shoulder with Georgia anymore, and that's a shame because that's what they were for 8-7 years in a row. And it's like, you can say, hey, that's not who they know who they are, and they've made and won national championships without signing top classes. But it's like, I don't think that world exists anymore. I think either you do or you don't.
I was going to add to Ari's comment is just the fact that Dabo still refuses to even acknowledge the transfer portal as a source. I think is really what puts them in peril, because it's obvious that he's just not going to go down that road. He just refuses to. And to me, you can't do that anymore in college football. He's
can't. He's taken a few guys, hasn't he?
Very few.
Has he taken 0 or?
It's like 3 in like 4 years or whatever it is.
It's not. There's no big splashes that he's taking.
Yeah,
it's just like, I don't know. Ohio State took 9, so maybe that's obviously probably too many for Dabo. But like Alabama, like it makes sense to plug in 2 or 3 holes a year.
Think about this. What if Dabo had gone out and gotten some of those elite receivers who were available the last couple of years? What if Jordan Addison, instead of going to USC, goes to Clemson? Are they as bad?
Then Narduzzi definitely wins the Royal Rumble if he goes to Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, to me, that's what it comes down to for Clemson, and why I think they're going to slip. Like, I agree with Ari in that regard. That said, as far as this year,
it's already started to happen though. Like, it's not like it's going to. It did. It happened already.
I just think it's going to continue. Like, it's
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But it's like, I mean, they weren't a very good football team last year. So we'll see what they look like now, and maybe Cade Klubnik will turn out to be the next Trevor Lawrence that saves them, but it's not. It's just not.
I still think there's a path for them, though, right? Like, there's always, especially with the 12-team playoff, there's always going to be a path for them to compete. They might not win it, but like I don't know. Like, even again this year when the ACC.
When Trevor Lawrence was in college, Clemson was the favorite or one of the 2 favorites to win the national championship every single year. And that's extended previously to when Deshaun Watson was there as the quarterback. And, I know they had 2 generational talents at quarterback during that period, but everybody likes to say that Clemson is the exception to the rule as it pertains to recruiting. And my only take has been and continues to be that they will no longer be a team that is an annual contender for a national championship recruiting the way they recruit. That doesn't mean that they won't have good years or that they won't be a good team. I'm not saying they're going to stink and play like Georgia Tech. I'm just saying they were a top 2 or 3 program in college football.
Drive by.
Georgia Tech went 19 years without signing a 4-star out of Atlanta. That's what they did to me. I just think that their status as a top 3 program in college football is a thing of the past.
Okay. Ready for some trivia? I've got multiple questions.
All right, let's do it.
All right,
great. How many internet problems now?
How many minutes late was Ari for the podcast today?
28.
25.
More like, I think it was 18. More like okay. That's not the question.
It was it was 27 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. There are currently 5 teams in the 247 Sports Composite top 20 that had a losing record in 2022. Name them.
Top 20.
Miami for sure.
5 of the 20.
Miami, A&M.
Yes. A&M had a losing record, huh?
5 and 7.
Auburn.
5 and 7.
Yes, that's a good one.
Florida.
Yep.
Number 3 class, 5 and 7 last year.
Well, they were 6 and 7.
You got one more. Well, no, they're 6 and 7. Yeah, they made a bowl, but they lost to Oregon State.
Losing record last year.
You
Grace
said
just
top
talked
20
about them. Grace just talked
Oklahoma.
Yes, number 16.
Oklahoma, yep.
Oh yeah, Oklahoma. Yeah.
And there's 2 more in the next 5 in the top 25. Stanford at 21 and Nebraska at 22.
All
right. Here's another question.
Oh, okay.
All right. Let me see. I got a lot of data here. I want to. How many of the top 10 overall recruits in the class of 2018?
Composite or regular?
Composite, like it matters. Yeah, composite. Because
it does matter.
Well, no, this is just more of like, I don't think you're going to know who they are.
Why are you yelling at me?
I'm not. This is just more like a trend. How many of them went on to be a first-round pick of the top 10?
Oh, 2018?
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence.
Yes. I'd be shocked if you could name them. I'm just curious. It's part of a research project I'm working on, so I've got some data.
How many?
Yeah, how many? You don't need to. I mean, I will tell you who they are.
Justin Fields was there or no?
Justin Fields.
Let's try to name them. We have some brain power. That wasn't that far, long ago.
Okay.
Was Justin Fields in the top 10? I can't remember.
Yeah, he was.
He did, right?
He was 2.
Micah Parsons was in that class, wasn't he?
Yes, you got 3 of them.
Yep.
How many more are there? Oh, that's
1.
the question, I guess.
Oh,
I know.
There's 4.
Let's guess 3 because we only named 3.
There's 4. I get. There's 1 more.
Who would be the fourth? Who would have been a 5-star that got drafted that high?
And there's 2 of the top 10 are still in college in their 6th year.
Wow.
Was Patrick Surtain a top 10?
I am extremely impressed with this group right here. Patrick Surtain the second, right? Yes. Patrick Surtain.
I have his rookie card.
Oh, there you go. So, can you name the 2 guys who are still in college? One of them has been in one school for 6 years, and the other one has been there, is in his 4th school.
Oh,
JT Daniels was in there.
No, JT Daniels was not top 10, but he is in that class.
Xavier Thomas.
He wasn't?
Xavier Thomas. JT Daniels
I thought JT Daniels
16.
was top 5. Oh.
He's 16.
Which one's still in school?
The other guy signed with Alabama.
Oh, is that the defensive lineman?
Yes.
Oh God.
Well traveled.
Yes, he's like
I know me.
Yeah, Ayaba
Anoma.
Yes.
He's like at Charlotte now.
Yes, he's at Charlotte. He was at Michigan, so he followed Biff.
Biff Poggi.
Yeah. To Charlotte. So this project I'm working on, this will yield a lot of
there's one thing, Mitch, and I know we're going to wrap it up here because it's an hour and 5, that we didn't mention that I think we probably should have.
Well, we still can.
That's what I'm saying. Let's get out of here before we do it. But USC picked up a pretty significant commitment yesterday or 2 days ago, and I think that we should just mention that.
Yes, of course it happens when I'm at the doctor and Grace came through and coordinated with Antonio and we got a good story up there. So go ahead, mention it, Ari.
I saw that Tackett Curtis is starting for linebacker for them.
Yeah.
2026 quarterback Julian Juju Lewis committed.
Number 1 player in the 26 class, right?
Number 1 player in the 2026 class, and it's just the next one. Like Malachi Nelson's in school now, but it's like the next commit in the lineage of USC quarterbacks that, and it's not a kid from California either. He's from Georgia, correct?
Yes, but the interesting thing about that is the spacing. We all talk about do you get 5 stars in back-to-back? They still have to recruit a 20. Malachi's a 23 kid. He's a freshman now, so they're going to have to recruit.
26 means,
but he might
reclassify.
He might reclass. I bet I'd be shocked if he doesn't reclassify. So that's going to be a storyline. What are they going to do in the 25 class? I mean, the 24 class. They don't have a quarterback, do they? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I think the idea is that Julian Lewis would succeed.
Right, but you still need a number. You still need Miller Moss.
Yeah, that they'll probably end up getting a transfer portal.
It's like the Ohio State or Clemson this year.
As long as you know who your next guy is, I think you're always in good shape. And then other than that, it's USC is the perfect destination. USC is the one program that doesn't have to care at all who they get out of high school at the quarterback position, because if there's ever a top tier quarterback transfer, they would go there in a second. So this isn't necessary for their health at the position. I just think it's an interesting thing that they identified a 14-year-old in Georgia, got him, and made that's it. So I just didn't want to get through the podcast without at least mentioning it. So.
Yeah. And speaking of discovering people, that we got to give Audrey Snyder credit for that one. She wrote about him when he was in 8th grade.
She did.
Wow.
Yeah. So there you go. All right, Ari, you want to do your thing?
All right, guys, that felt good. Didn't it feel good?
Yes.
Nice.
Thank you so much for listening to the latest edition of Stars Matter. Follow on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Of course, we would love to use any 5-star review that you'd be able to give us. Follow Mitch, Grace, Manny, and myself on Twitter at Mitch Light, at GM Raynor, RAYNOR, at Manny_Navarro, and of course at Ari Wasserman. It was a pleasure to present this back to you guys, and super excited to do this weekly moving forward into the season. So take care, brush your hair.